Three, two, one. There we go. We're here with Dr. Tony Huge, and we're going to be discussing a very serious issue that's going on that he had some personal experience with. But first and foremost, I'd like to thank you, Tony, for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate you taking that time out of your day to do so.
Sure, Armin. Yeah, it's actually here. It's a nighttime. Like late night, and there it's morning. So
Yeah.
Funny time difference.
Yeah, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. And Tony, where are you located at now?
Thailand, in the city of Pattaya.
Okay. Is that where you've been since you've kind of transitioned there, or are you moving cities?
I came to Thailand a year and a half ago, and I originally was spending most of my time in Bangkok.
Mm-hmm.
But when the lockdown stuff started happening, Pattaya had a lot more freedom.
Got it. So how did, I guess in general, like how did Thailand take COVID? Like how did everything kind of go down there?
It's so fascinating because if you look at every country in the world, each country handles it differently and has different results. And you'd think that science has no borders. Like a human being in Thailand should have the same, side effects and symptoms and things of something in the US, but you can just see how political this whole thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID first started, there was almost no deaths in Thailand. And nobody knew anybody who had any symptoms from it. And yet it had swept through Thailand long before it hit the US. So it just goes to show that in the very beginning, what a total scam it was, because like everybody had it and they were immune and they had no effects from it. And it didn't deserve any attention whatsoever. I mean, that later changed. I believe the virus keeps mutating and getting worse. But in the beginning, there was no reason for any lockdown or anything other than politics. And what was happening here, I got to be careful what I say because it is a military dictator government that doesn't have freedom of speech.
Yeah, for sure. Just, use your own discretion when you speak.
So there a lot of I'll say this, like it's quite suspicious that there was no actual COVID problem in Thailand at the time, and yet they started and yet there was protesting against the government, and the lockdowns seemed to coincide perfectly with trying to prevent the protest. So I'm not saying that's what happened, and I'm just saying that the timing of these things happened. Like, I don't think it's illegal for me to say the fact the timing of these things happened looks suspicious.
Yeah. I mean, well, so often it does, right? We don't have to go into the, to the weeds, but you can pick up a history book and figure that out.
But also in Thailand, things are just really blunt and in your face. If you're smart and you can see what's going on, it's like you can really see the how government and people and money works. Whereas in the United States, everything is an illusion, everything is hidden, and the manipulation of the media is so technologically advanced to brainwash people that nobody realizes how things really work. So what's interesting is if you come to a place like Thailand, where it's pretty transparent because they don't have to be illusory about it, you can see how humans and government and money works, and you can take that knowledge and then through that lens look at America and you go, oh, wow, that's what's happening. That's how it really worked. That's why they're doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I was just on a podcast recently where we were kind of talking about how, like, in the I'm originally from the Soviet Union, and we were just talking about how in the United States, Americans like have a overwhelming, and you might say that's kind of changing now, but like an overwhelming trust of authority, and that people in other countries, especially like towards the East and stuff like that, I guess you're saying Thailand as well, we kind of like understand that, how things work in reality, as far as like governments and like people and their subjects and so forth, and everything is not what it seems to be and so forth, and yeah, it's I'm curious if it's just like a geographical thing, or if it's like the government system thing, but it's definitely something that's palpable. Like you can really feel it, the difference between the people. So
it's a race thing too. I mean, different races genetically, some races just follow authority.
Mhm.
And it's just like built into their epigenetics because of centuries and thousands of years of basically, if you didn't, then you were exterminated.
Mhm.
So through
Yeah.
natural selection, you have certain races of humans that follow authority, and you have other races of humans that challenge authority.
Right, right. Yeah, we were recently talking about like how the Chinese are very disciplined people. It's like, here, like in the States, like you have like, arguments and fighting over mask wearing. And it's like, that doesn't happen like in China or, other places similar to that, so. But anyway, so the main subject that I really wanted to kind of talk to you about is your battle with the Delta variant, which you've been kind of pretty, vocal about. Can you kind of tell me like the beginnings of it, like how you think you got it, like, kind of initial, feelings that you got from it?
I think the person who gave it to me is my gym partner. We're training together every day, and he started showing some symptoms that they rose to the level of maybe allergies. It was really mild for him, but now looking back, I realized that was probably COVID. But it's so highly contagious. It could be from anywhere, and it doesn't matter. And I don't blame him at all. I mean, everybody's going to have to catch this and build immunity. It's just a matter of time. It's like better to catch it earlier than later, in my opinion. So actually, thank you for giving it to me, right? Actually, when I originally came to Thailand, I came to confront COVID head on. I was like, I'm going to catch it and I'm going to defeat it. I'm going to show people how easy it was. And it was. The first strain was easy for my body to defeat. I had it. I didn't even have any symptoms, and I built immunity, and I couldn't catch it again. And then this Delta variant comes, and I don't have immunity for the Delta variant. So for me, at first, I thought I was just overtraining. I just felt a little bit tired, and then when I first sort of started the most mild sort of flu symptoms, I instantly did my protocol. I took my hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D. I took all this stuff that we know to take if you research, outside of the mainstream media. And then I felt better. Like the next morning I was fine. That was that night. And the next morning I was 100%. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to keep taking all this stuff. It's not healthy to megadose all this stuff for extended periods, and I feel fine. So either I beat it really quick or it was a false alarm. And then all of a sudden, the more 24 hours later, then it came back and it hit me hard. And the first thing it did is it hit my brain. So my brain stopped working. I was like really like mentally fatigued, and my body was really sore, like for no reason. I wasn't like, everything was tight. And so I was getting this inflammation in my brain and in my body, and it didn't really hit my lungs that hard at first either. So I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to do my protocol and I'll be fine. But I have compromised lungs from injury from as a child. So eventually when it did get to my lungs, that's when the inflammation hit so hard it almost killed me. And I was sitting on my couch, drowning, suffocating for air. And now I see how people die from this. I totally get why people die, and it's definitely deadly and people can die. But there's no reason people should die from it. If they had the right medication, and if I had properly treated myself, which I didn't do because my brain fog was interfering with my ability to treat myself, then it's really no dangerous than the common flu or cold or anything.
Yeah. So when you said you had that onset of gasping for air, was that like immediate? Would this take time to happen?
No, that came in like a week later. Yeah, the lung capacity, yeah, it was just decreasing over time. Like if we say 100% lung capacity is you can take a deep breath and you get 100% of the oxygen out of that air, or as much as your body's supposed to absorb, that's 100%. By the time my lungs got worse, a week, 10 days in, when it was its absolute worst, it was my lung capacity was probably 10%. So I was taking these little breaths of air like this.
That's crazy. That's so terrible. I can't even imagine how that would feel. So at that point, like, what do you do? When you're in that low in oxygen, like what steps did you take?
What someone should probably do is go to the hospital And I don't think a ventilator is the right thing. I mean, I have a breathing machine here, and I tried that, and it felt like I was drowning and suffocating. I mean, it's a scary feeling. But if I had an oxygen tank, then you can survive off of little tiny breaths of air, because the oxygen concentration is higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I had an oxygen tank at the time, but I was nervous. I was so nervous to go to the hospital. All my friends around me ended up getting COVID also at the same time, Delta, and we're all recovering right now, and all had different, degrees of severity. I had by far the worst, but I had another friend that was pretty close, and he went to the hospital. And my other mistake was not taking antibiotics. I was really trying to avoid taking antibiotics, and it was so stupid of me. I should have taken azithromycin much earlier, and I should have had dexamethasone. These are the two things that would have saved me all this trouble. Dexamethasone to prevent the inflammation of the lungs, and azithromycin to kill the bacteria that grows as a result of the inflammation.
Why were you trying? I'm sorry. Why were you trying to avoid taking antibiotics?
Because I save the antibiotics for STDs in Thailand here. And I'm like, Jesus, I just took antibiotics, a month ago. I don't want to hit myself again with antibiotics. And, and that's not it. There's something else. Like when my brain fog was so bad, sometimes my logic didn't make sense. Like I obviously should have taken antibiotics earlier. I mean, what the hell was I thinking? But my brain wasn't working. Like I couldn't figure that out. I was like a freaking vegetable. Like the inflammation in the brain is something that I think they don't talk about as much. They think about only about the lungs, but it can hit your brain, it can hit your heart, and digestive system too.
Yeah. I had someone on a podcast recently, and they were researching some medication. She was part of the clinical research here in the States, and they were researching some medication, and she couldn't tell me what the name was. That was has been around for like 100 years, and they were researching it for helping digestive issues with COVID. So, sometimes there's stuff that's already out there that can be reapplied, to help with newer diseases. Yeah.
All the drugs that humans ever need have already been invented and already exist. All of them. That's exactly right. It's just a matter of finding what goes to where. And the problem is, since 100,000s of drugs have been invented before, they can't be patented. Yeah. So the drug companies are always trying to invent new drugs that we don't need, when there's old drugs that work perfectly fine for all of these things. And if you try to tell people about the old drugs working just fine, like we don't need these new drugs, we don't need these new injections, none of this new stuff is necessary. All the new drugs that are coming out on the market, most of them are completely unnecessary. There's already drugs that work for it, but the drug companies invest hundreds of millions of dollars in censoring the old medications so that they can bring out new medications.
Yeah, it's definitely a business. So one crazy thing that she told me, you wouldn't, well, you might believe it. I was going to say you wouldn't believe it, but you actually probably would. So she said that there's timelines, and you have to be really strict into making these timelines when you're doing the trials, because there's a certain period of time that the company has to make money before the generics are allowed to come out. So she says she regularly sees medication that would either cure or extremely help people in need not get put out because the timeline wasn't kept. And so the amount of time that the company has at the end to remake their or make their money is shortened. So they're like, it's not even worth it. Just scratch the whole thing. Cause we're only going to have a month to make money and then the generics come out. So it's insane to me that people are not going to get help that they need because the company doesn't have enough time to make the money that they want,
Yep. Yeah. And it's like, how could this be possible? Right. But you know what? Honestly, people are idiots, people are sheep. And, like what we have right now in the president of the United States is a hardcore proponent of the pharmaceutical monopolies. So you've got an advocate for the pharmaceutical monopolies in power, and the party that's controlling in the United States is all in support of the pharmaceutical monopolies. So these people get voted in. The people, well, not that the voting's totally accurate, but the mainstream media is so powerful at convincing people to elect people or to support a government that allows for monopolies and prioritizes profits of large corporations instead of the health of its citizens. And people vote that way, and people argue in forums that way and everything. And they don't realize that those aren't even their thoughts and their beliefs. Those are just programs being installed in their brains by the mainstream media.
So how is the medical field in Thailand? Like, are drugs easy to get? Are there restrictions?
So the mainstream medical monopolies pay most attention to countries like the United States, where they can make more money, and Europe and Australia. Well, sort of. Australia is a little bit different, but in Thailand, it's really easy for them. There's a couple brands here like Bayer that just bribed their way to have full control and do whatever they want. And it's all about bribes. Everything, it's about like, how much is the pharmaceutical company going to pay to get a monopoly? But the pharmaceutical companies aren't really like pushing it that hard here. So what you have in the pharmacies is you have a lot of cheap generics, and you have a lot of cheap pharmaceuticals that are pretty much over the counter, but it's hit or miss. Like sometimes you'll find a medication here that costs $5 that in the US costs $100. But sometimes you'll find a medication that costs like $45, and in the US it costs $45. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's exactly the same. I'll say it's never more expensive, but it's just kind of hit or miss, because there's also always a supply and demand. Like some things are in high supply because of the demand caused the supply, and the prices come down. And so it's just like any economy thing. But for the most part, most of what you need is available over the counter. But there's also a lot of prescriptions that are not in Thailand. Like they just don't even acknowledge it or whatever, because they don't really look outside their little box. But there's a little bit more of an Eastern medicine influence in Thailand, like a lot of Asian countries, than in the US. I think the medical care in Thailand is better than the US, solely because the medical monopolies aren't investing as much into controlling it. And so there's more freedom and more free market. And so you actually have better treatments for much cheaper. So yeah, I'd say the medical system and availability of prescriptions in Thailand is far superior, like 20 years ahead of the US, but so are most countries, really.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. One of our friends went to, I believe it was like Costa Rica or some kind of place like that, like some Latin place, and they said that their medical care was like higher than the United States, which is, for someone who lives in the States, that's like, you think that's crazy talk, but there's a lot of places that are like that, like you said.
Yeah, it's good. The prices are all over the place. You can go one place and go to the hospital and pay $100, and you can go another place in the world and pay $5,000. I mean, that's the extreme price difference of medical care. Yeah. But it's all we're paying for is people's times and medications and using a machine. The prices shouldn't be that drastic.
Right.
It's just the bottom line is they charge as much as they possibly can get away with.
Right.
That's
right.
what it has nothing to do with actual costs.
Yeah. Human greed. Yeah. Comes into play for sure. So as far as the medication, are they usually like all on point? Or do you ever run into situations where they just end up being bunk, No,
they're all on point. I mean, of course, there's always underground stuff, but the thing is, another thing that America and Western world wants to convince people of is like the quality of medication or something. But the truth is, the medications have the same sort of quality issues and standards as normal supplements do, like vitamin C. I mean, really, a pharmaceutical drug should be no more expensive and no more complicated than vitamin C. They're all just molecules created in a lab. I mean, vitamin C is supposed to be natural, right? But usually, like most Most chemicals and pharmaceuticals and supplements are created in a laboratory. And some medications cost $5,000 a dosage in this world, and some medications cost $3. And usually there's really no reason for that price difference other than a monopoly.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I mean, well, it doesn't make sense, but that's just how the world is. How did so you have this deprivation of oxygen. You grab your mask. You said normally people would go to the hospital. You were trying to avoid it, trying to avoid antibiotics. What happens at that point?
Yeah, and I tried to avoid going to the hospital because I knew people who get put in these COVID concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks horrible. It's like prison, so I was like, God, I don't want to get. So now later what happened is basically they say, okay, if you want to be admitted to the hospital, if you want to be in the hospital, then you're going to have to stay for 2 weeks, or you can go home and isolate. So I'm like, I just didn't want that risk because I don't trust them locking me up and me not having access to my own supplements and all that.
Right.
Plus I have to go back to my, another reason why I didn't treat myself properly is I kept thinking I'm just going to get better. Like my lung capacity is 20%. I'm like, okay, tomorrow it's going to be back up to 30%. Like, oh, it's 15%. It's okay. Tomorrow it'll be 20%. I was being very optimistic. And so I wasn't, until I nearly died, I wasn't taking it seriously. And finally, once I nearly died, then it was like, okay, I am going to die unless I solve this in the next couple hours.
They got that close. How low did your oxygen level get? Do you remember?
So, I have a blood oxygen level meter, right? And they say that if you get below 92, then that's when you are at risk of dying, right?
Yeah.
But my blood oxygen level actually wasn't dropping that much. But what was happening was, like, I would almost pass out. It was weird because my blood oxygen would be 97, which, usually it's 99, right? 98,
right.
99. But it'd be 97. But I'd be like blacking out and I'd be sucking for air. And I was confused about that too. I'm like thinking, God, is there something wrong with this? Because I feel like I'm blacking out, but this thing says 97.
Yeah.
And my girl was actually the same thing. Like her blood oxygen was showing 98, but she actually literally blacked out multiple times and passed out on the floor. So the blood oxygen, it's not just about the blood oxygen. I don't know why. I'm not confused about that, other than now I'm just realizing maybe my blood oxygen meter is just totally inaccurate.
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be fairly accurate, though. I mean, there's not a lot of technology that necessarily goes into that.
Yeah.
So
well, they cost $3 and it's super simple.
Right. So I had the same thing. So I ran about 97 when I had the original strain. I never got Delta, but I, just like you, I had a very easy time with it. I think I had a fever for 1 day and then it was over. But my oxygen never went below like 98, 97. So yeah, so do you think that maybe there was something else going on? Could it be the inflammation of your brain or anything like that you think might have caused
the inflammation of the brain? And also I'm realizing now blood sugar also might have been part of it, because I couldn't eat, and maybe eating like 300 calories per day, trying to drink juice and things like that. But I realized later when I got my blood test, I did blood test the day before yesterday, got my results yesterday. So post COVID, I know what my body is doing. And my fasting blood glucose is now 72. That's really, I've never seen my fasting blood glucose that low.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, wow, my blood glucose is probably chronically low from practically starvation. And I think a combination of the inflammation of the brain plus the low blood glucose was what was making me almost black out.
Yeah. What about your girl? You said that she was having similar issues. Was she also not eating as much during that time?
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
Her breathing never got as bad as mine. Like mine was pretty extreme. But I would treat her, I'd give her all the same supplements and drugs I was taking. So when I hit like 10% capacity, her lungs were probably like 20%
Mm-hmm.
capacity. And so she never got that low, and I treated her, and then, you know, she
Right.
got better faster.
Right.
She recovered much faster than me too, because she didn't let herself get that bad.
Yeah, and then you also having the compromised lungs, that obviously also plays a huge factor. There, that's part of the what kind of keeps going around is that if you have some kind of underlying conditions, that's kind of the area where this virus really hits you hard. So
Yeah, and after COVID, testing my blood work, I have so much inflammation in my body still right now, that if I would have had any kind of a heart condition or diabetes or anything like that, I would have died. So I
yeah,
could definitely see how that would have made the difference, because I was already close to it.
right,
And if I
right.
had any pre-existing condition, that would have been enough to do it.
Well, so you're hours away from potential death. What do you do at that point?
That's when I finally took azithromycin. I was hitting my asthma inhaler. Thank God for the asthma inhaler. And then I was doing like lower dosages of certain medicines, and then I just blasted it.
Mhm.
I took one of the biggest differences I did was I took a mega dose of methylene blue, which is a blue color dye, basically. That's a miracle for the health of the human body. And I was looking on my phone, like trying to figure out, my brain's working so slow, and it was so hard to search on my phone. But I was trying to figure out, like, what's going wrong? Like, why am I off on, why did my protocol work? And I just realized my dosages of everything was just too low. So
Mhm.
that's when I just jacked up the dosages of everything, especially methylene blue, and then adding azithromycin. And then that's when it got better. And then I was okay. It was like, okay, I go from 10% to 15% lung capacity. I feel I can breathe, take a little bit deeper breaths. And then I relaxed, because then I'm like, okay, I'm going the right direction. Because
Mhm.
if I had gone further the other direction, I'd be dead. But since it started going the other direction, then I was like, okay, now I could relax.
So this entire time, so you start trending better. This entire time, you never went to the hospital, and you were able to, I guess, secure this victory over Delta variant right at home.
And my friend who didn't have it quite as bad, but he had it pretty bad, he went to the hospital and he got lung x-rays and he got medications and everything. And so he treated himself about the same time that I did. So I got to kind of live through the hospital experience through him. I know what it would have been like. And honestly, I should have gone to the hospital. I mean, it turned out okay, but just knowing that the hospital didn't actually like arrest him, and like I was afraid of, and that they did treat him and he didn't have to wait too long. And, I
But
should have
why
done.
why would me being kind of ignorant of Thai circumstances and laws and stuff, why would they have arrested him?
Because I had friends that, okay, I'll give you one example that really
Mhm.
scared me. There was a girlfriend I have. She's at her house, slash work. These girls work in a bar, they live
Mhm.
upstairs, they do webcam, this kind of stuff, right?
Mhm. Right, right.
And what happened is someone told on them. Someone called the police and said, so I think so and so has COVID. So
I
so
see.
they come out like a military thing. They come out and they test this person for COVID, and they say, okay, there's 30 people in this building. Now all 30 people, because one person tested positive, now everybody has to get tested, and anybody who's positive, which is like 28 out of 30 of the people, they get hauled away and put in this warehouse with no air conditioning, with these beds that are so close together. And it's like, these tests aren't even very accurate.
Mhm.
And so now you're throwing people who probably aren't sick, uh, into this giant warehouse where they're just going to get even more sick and pass disease amongst all themselves and have an unsanitary environment. And it's like a prison.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
really happening here. And it's happening in a lot of Asian countries, and you don't see it on the news or anything. And they send me pictures and everything. And I'm like, holy cow, this is actually happening.
Wow.
Like, this is scary because I can't survive like that. I mean,
Yeah.
these Thai people, they can sleep on the floor and they grow up in poverty and they're used to this kind of life. Their immune systems are used to that kind of life. But me, I'm not going to be able to sleep without air conditioning. I'm not going to be able to handle not getting what electrolytes or food or whatever
Right.
By the way, I think deficiency in electrolytes was my other biggest mistake.
Mhm.
Because I wasn't eating or drinking anything, I think one of the reasons my condition got so bad is I have a fast metabolism. I'm a bodybuilder. I was profusely sweating from fevers. And I like the taste of minerals, trying to put salt in my water would make me vomit.
Oh
So
wow.
like I didn't take minerals, and my brain fog prevented me from realizing remembering how important electrolytes were. And I think electrolyte deficiency had a lot to do with why I got hit so hard.
Yeah. Well, that tends to happen when people get sick. They kind of stop like nutrition, right? Because you feel terrible. You don't want to do anything. And I'm sure with Delta it was even worse, So it's like, and then you just end up, your body just ends up basically like, decomposing. You're like all your electrolytes, all your, nutrition, everything that you were doing when you were healthy to keep yourself healthy. Now you're stopped doing because you feel so terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think, you have such two extremes. You don't have a lot of in between. You have people that have like no symptoms because they go along their normal diet and exercise and healthy lifestyle, and it doesn't really get them down. But then if there's like this chink in the armor and it
Yeah.
gets through, and then it causes brain fog, now you can't make good decisions, and then you start getting sweats and you lose your electrolytes, and it's like a downward spiral, and you get the inflammation, then you can't breathe. Because you can't breathe, you can't get enough oxygen, and all of those things work together to pretty much kill you eventually.
How's the vaccine situation there? Are they offering vaccines in Thailand or not really?
Yeah, it's like I actually have a lot of insider information on this and a lot of other things. I can't say everything, but I'll say
Sure.
that the according to the media, there's a shortage of vaccines,
Mhm.
and people are like they're like trying to create demand for it. They're like, oh my gosh, now the vaccine's available, hurry and go and get it. And everybody rushes and goes and gets the vaccine. So most of the Thai people are wanting the vaccine,
Mhm.
but you still have like the smarter Thai people who do the research that are like, wait a second, the side effects of the vaccine are far worse than the actually getting COVID for most people.
Mhm.
It just depends on your health and your predisposition and all that. But there is also a lot of censorship. So what happened is, the World Health Organization is like this very fascist organization that's one of the tools that's being used to take over the entire world and create a medical monopoly and a monopoly against freedom. And the problem is the government in Thailand has now passed a law that you are not allowed to contradict the World Health Organization. That's how powerful the World Health Organization is they are going country to country and teaching and showing governments how to enforce censorship against their people for the benefit of the World Health Organization. I mean, it's the most corrupt, it's basically Nazi Germany all over again. Only this time, these very powerful people learned from all the mistakes of the past, and this time they're not going to make the same mistakes, and they're going to go all the way with it.
Mm. What benefit would they have, do you think, by doing this?
They being
The
just the
World
powerful
Health
people in the world.
World Health Organization.
Well, World Health Organization is just a tool. That's like, what benefit does the police have in enforcing the laws? They
I
just
see.
do what they're told. That there's no independence whatsoever. They take phone calls from their biggest donors, which are Bill Gates, United States government, the Chinese government. You can look at the list of who funds the World Health
Right.
Organization.
I see what you mean. So kind of pivoting back to like more on the bodybuilding side. So how much muscle and weight did you lose throughout this whole experience? Like what did it do to your body? That's probably a better question.
So, my weight fluctuates. Our weight always fluctuates, right? So maybe before COVID, I was 224. and maybe a couple months ago I was 236,
Yeah.
right? So it just,
Yeah.
it depends on whether I want to be huge or shredded or bloated or dry.
Right.
So 224 right before COVID probably, and dropped down to probably at my lightest, not eating and dehydrated, I was probably like 190. But I actually, what I weighed myself with after COVID is actually 194. So actual like scale weight when I actually weighed myself was 224 down to 194, which is 30 pounds.
Yeah. So was that then all when you were 224, and just it's hard sometimes to tell from Instagram pictures because you don't know when they're being taken, but you look pretty solid. So is that a 224, a solid 224?
That's a solid 224 at 9% body fat, fairly dry, like looking like a bodybuilder, vascular and pumped, and now I probably have a similar amount of body fat. I don't think I lost very much fat, because when you're 9% or lower body fat, your body would rather get rid of muscle than fat, unless you're actually. The thing is, I was like, when this is happening, I was like, if I just take Yohimbine and some fat burners along with my fever and my calorie deprivation, I would burn a ton of fat and I'd get shredded. But like, that was just not the priority. I was trying to survive, right?
Right.
But someone could take an opportunity for a caloric restriction, use the right supplements, and lose only fat and not lean body mass. That's possible.
So essentially you lost like pretty much all muscle, the 30 pounds of muscle.
Yeah, and of course it's a lot of water and a lot of glycogen and nutrients that'll come back fairly quickly.
Right.
But actually, like, I'm eating more food every day, and my body weight is still 194 or 195. So it's really not coming back fast. Yeah. But then I'm not training. So I think if I went to the gym and I trained and then I ate, I think then the muscle would volumize again. But I'm not going to be able to train for. I mean, I'm starting with walking, like day one was a 5-minute walk. Day two is a 10-minute walk.
Yeah.
Today was a 40-minute walk, and after 40 minutes of just slow walking, I've been absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
I feel like I worked out for 3 hours.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your body went through such the beating, being that close to dying, that now it's like to try to push yourself too hard, too early could be detrimental. I would think. Yeah,
I'll take baby steps.
Yeah.
Especially since my inflammation in my body is still so high, I could really have a heart attack. A friend of mine told me that a lot of people after COVID, they end up dying a couple weeks after recovering from COVID from a heart attack, because the inflammation is still in their body, and then they push themselves, right?
Yeah.
So like, wow. Thank God he told me that.
Yeah, I heard exactly the same thing. When I had COVID, one of the things that a family member was telling me that works in the hospital and surgery, they said a lot of young men are dying from heart attacks after COVID because they go train immediately, and then they just fall out. So definitely a big issue. So what do you think you're going to do? I know you're taking baby steps. We just discussed that but let's say you get to the point of, now you're able to lift the weights. Like, what is your protocol or your steps now to try to get that physique back?
It'll probably be for the next, probably 3 or 4 days of just increasing my walking time. And then I'll probably go to the gym after that, and I'll just do like all the machines, and I'll do just full body, and I'll just do like a weight that I could probably do 50 reps for, and I'll probably just do 10 reps. It'll be mainly about just like stretching the muscle and blood flow. I'm gonna try hard not to actually tear the muscle down, because I don't want to create more inflammation. So I'm going to work out to avoid inflammation, mostly for the circulation and just to get everything moving again. And, there's some risk in that now that I think about it, because my D-dimer is normal is 0 to 500. So let's say normally it'd be 200 or mine's 2000, more than 2,400 right now.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So like I am at a very serious risk of blood clot, stroke, pulmonary embolism, heart attack. So I think I need to gently get the blood flow moving and get rid of this inflammation. And then Olympia is less than 7 weeks from now, or roughly something like that.
Yeah, I think it's like it's in this what
October, early October.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Just I think like 7 weeks from now. I should actually have a countdown. I should have a countdown.
Are you going to be there? Are you going to try to go?
Yeah, I'll be there because I'll have a huge booth there. You know, I've got Big Ramey, Dennis James. I've got the enhanced booth.
Awesome.
I'll have a lot of really cool fitness influencers and celebrities there with me.
That's amazing. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. So I've got to look, you know, well, I don't
I got to now be careful, Tony. You don't want to be, I got to look the part and have a stroke.
Yeah. So I'll very gradually increase my workout capacity. The goal would be that at least the week before Olympia, I could do one of my mass blast transformations. So, you know, 6 weeks from now, maybe I'm healthy enough where I could do a mass blast where I do growth hormone and insulin and SARMs and gear and IGF, and put on, because I can put on someone, I can put on as much muscle as they can eat. It's their food is the only limitation when you take all this chemistry at once and blast it. So I'll do that same thing. I'll liquefy my food. I'll drink 8,000 clean calories and hit the IGF, HGH, insulin, and all that. And it's basically as much as I can eat that week is how much weight I'll gain.
Is this weight like good solid weight? Or are we talking just strictly mass?
Solid weight. Like actual, like visual, like when you look at me,
sculpted.
It will be sculpted.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, that's great. You're going to have a big booth in the Olympia and everything. I'm hoping I'll be there. Are you doing anything as far as the Arnold is concerned?
No.
Just strictly focus.
Deal with. Yeah.
Yeah. Strictly focus on the Olympia. How much work does it take to get, all that, you know, all the planning and everything involved to get a booth in the Olympia and, you know, get everything set up, and you have a team of people that are working on that?
Yeah, in previous years I was involved a little bit more with it, and it was a lot of work. I mean, you know, especially if you got a supplement company and, you know, you've got all your employees have their duties, like how do you pull employees away from all their duties and basically give them a full-time job of organizing the expo, right? It's a lot of resources and extremely expensive. We spent at the expo, you know, 3 years ago when Enhanced Athlete was at its peak, we spent $150,000.
Wow.
For the expo.
Just for the expo. That's crazy.
So this will be similar, actually. This will probably be a similar cost, around 150,000, and so it's very expensive. But you know, it's once a year. It's the biggest expo in the world. We are one of the, you know, biggest supporters of the Olympia and bodybuilding now that we have two of the biggest athletes, and this is our niche. So it's another year to go big.
Yeah.
But I don't have to do all of that. There's plenty of people that are hired to
take care of those things. Yeah, that's good. You need to focus all your energy and strength on recovery.
Yeah, it really is. I have to focus on it or I won't be in good condition by then. I can tell, like, it's not just going to happen. Like, it's going to take work because my body just broken down.
Yeah. So I mean, to speak on your experience, if someone does get the Delta variant, like what are your, I guess, advice or anything that you can tell them, you know, to do?
Yeah, so I have a Telegram group and I posted a lot in there and I got a lot of really good responses. So like all this stuff is in the Tony Huge channel Telegram group. But from, you know, just off the top of my head, this is what I'll say, because what I'll do for myself for the future, because I'm going to get hit with another variant someday in the future and I'm going to be ready this time. I'm not going to make the same mistakes. It's almost like I'm going to have a first aid kit. and I'll be traveling around, so I'm not going to carry an oxygen tank with me. But if I was going to be in one place, I'd have an oxygen tank, I'd have ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and those are antivirals. So I would, there's other ones that are actually better now that have come out. There's ones that like the Singapore government has actually approved for COVID as being even more effective than the vaccine, that are just simple, cheap tablets. So there's lots of different antiviral drugs. So let's just say I would have the antiviral drugs. I would have the zinc and vitamin D and vitamin C in very high megadoses. I would have the azithromycin as the antibiotic for the subsequent bacterial infection. I would have 2 asthma inhalers, an albuterol inhaler, and I think the other one's like budesonide is the one that's working for COVID really effectively. And I would have dexamethasone, the anti-inflammatory corticosteroid cortisol, basically, just the oral tablets of that. And that's probably all I would need. I mean, I would also have N-acetylcysteine and quercetin and methylene blue for sure. But like, there's 2 different approaches. One approach would be like to prevent getting it or prevent any symptoms, which is like you'd be heavy on the antivirals and you'd never even need the antibiotics because you would have hit the antivirals early on hardcore, and the zinc and the vitamin D. Or there's the other approach of like, I'm not going to blast myself with antivirals. I'll just, if I get the symptoms like the difficulty breathing and the inflammation gets bad, then I'll take all this other stuff. And I would be taking a baby aspirin for sure all the time now. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think anybody needed to be on a baby aspirin all the time, but now you have people dropping dead from the vaccine, like very common, people having heart attacks and strokes from the vaccine. And that's from blood clots, because the vaccine causes blood clots the same way that the actual virus does through the spike protein. So like everybody in the world is now going to have this this problem of blood clotting from either getting the virus or getting the vaccine. Either way, you're going to have a blood clot risk. So it's almost like the whole world needs to be on aspirin now.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned that you're at high risk for that. You're taking baby aspirin now every day.
I'm taking baby aspirin, but my friend who went through the same thing I went through with all this, and so he's already ahead of me on the research and everything. He recommended another one that would be even more effective, specifically to get my D-dimer, that's the biggest risk. That's the type of inflammation of the blood coagulation that is the biggest risk for a COVID person. And he just recommended to me that I take, it's another medication. He wrote me a huge thing today that I need to after this or tomorrow morning.
So also like an anti-clotting type of medication.
Yeah. Here. More effective than the aspirin for lowering D-dimer is rivaroxaban. Rivaroxaban, Xarelto.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of it. Must be.
Then he told me he said for lung to get my lung function back, because right now my lung capacity is probably 70%. It's not nowhere near recovered. Like when I try to take a deep breath, it's like asthma. It's just like I breathe in like I'm breathing in like 100% of air should come in, but only 70% of air comes in.
Well, I was actually going to say that I noticed that when we were talking, that I felt like you were still had a little bit of that, so to speak, constriction when you're breathing.
Yeah, this is the one that. Let's see, it's hard to get.
The glare.
Focus. It's a lot of glare. God, that's a lot of glare. Okay,
yeah,
it's nintedanib. All this stuff I'll put on like the Tony Huge .is website or the Telegram.
Well, you've got a tremendous following, so a lot of people are looking at, and especially with you having this experience, you're gonna definitely like help a lot of people out.
Yeah. It's almost, I almost feel like it's fate, like this is kind of a calling now. Not that I'm the most knowledgeable person in the world to talk about it, but people listen to me, and I'm known for being so transparent and honest. They know that if I say something, it's true or researched or
Mhm.
with no ulterior motive. So I
Right.
think that's what advantage I have to
Yeah.
help
Well,
people.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like there's always seems to be an ulterior motive when, when people are giving information. And so a lot of times people are very skeptical of, what they, or at least they should be. We're skeptical of what's being, said. So being transparent and not having a motive, outside of just being genuine is, the best way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Tony, I know it's late there. I know you're also, don't have your full strength back. So I want to just let you know that I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I'll link everything below this video, guys. So just check out Tony and his company, and just go ahead and follow him on Instagram. And Tony, again, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Harmon. Be swell and full of friends of freedom, pioneers, human evolution.
Take care. Bye.